Hi Mum, you do everything for everyone else. Let me help you make your life easier. Quick, short information to make you empowered and remind you why you are so important. Because if you don't know what's on the menu, how can you choose what's right for you? Hi, I'm Elena, Director of my private practice Supportive Therapy, an everyday Aussie mum trying not to lose my biscuits and my kids. As a mental health professional, I'm here to share my secrets so no other mother feels alone or powerless. Knowledge is power, and I want you to be powerful. Think of it like I'm your mindset coach through all of this. Everything's backed by science and psychology. I believe in you, and I want you to be the best version of yourself. To be happy and feel in control, you need to be mentally strong.
So my name is Elena Bishop and I'm from Mentally Strong Mums. So today there will kind of be a bit of a follow-up after last week's episode, which was on covert narcissism. And if you didn't listen to it or you would like more information, sometimes we think that narcissistic personality types or traits are quite obvious and overt. And the difference is sometimes we have someone who's covert narcissistic behaviours or tendencies or patterns of behaviour. So it's understanding how to best identify to be able to understand and protect yourself, as well as not putting yourself in danger or creating unnecessary conflict, okay? And then when we were talking about conflict, we then want to move on to how to be able to negotiate and talk with and deal with high conflict people. And sometimes in life, it feels like it's inevitable that the people that we're with, whether they're work colleagues or siblings or a partner, family members or even friends, every single time there's always a reason, there's always a problem, it's always an issue. And so it's really, really difficult when you're with someone who's high conflict, because sometimes it's the same thing where it's not overt and obvious, it's just the niggles or the passive aggressive. So at least that's what we're going to have a quick talk about today. So high conflict person, HCP. And so traditional communication generally fails with them. And then we're able to understand science-backed strategies that you can use to be able to protect your mental strength. Mentally strong, that's kind of what we need. So we need to be able to have a look at some of the experts. And the expert that's out there at the moment, his name is Bill Eddy, EDDY. And he's a real-world psychologist who understands high conflict people and how it can corrode relationships and how dealing with a high conflict person is exhausting. So a lot of the stuff that I've gotten today is a lot of research from his body of work, because he's the leading world expert in this kind of field, right? So because my episodes are quite short, I give you a lot of efficient information in a short period of time, but at least if you want to be able to do some research, he has a lot of different podcasts, he has books as well. And if all of this resonates with you, that's where you would then go for that, right? So understanding what is a high conflict personality, sometimes why you can't reason with them the way that you can with other people, forewarning signs when you're dealing with them, as well as he's got a special BIFF technique. And back in the day, what was it with the footy show, Bring Back the Biff? This isn't it. But I'll go through and explain what the BIFF technique is, and especially with me, how to be able to stay regulated, empowered, and clear-headed. And sometimes for women, our biology betrays us, and if we're with a high conflict individual who's identifies as a male, that's dominated with testosterone, that can sometimes then scare estrogen, and then estrogen will then people please or fawn. So how to be able to know that you're not the problem, and being able to have strategies that can be able to build confidence within yourself. So it's almost like sometimes thinking if you've ever known a high conflict person. So some of the evidence is that, have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you were spun around in circles, emotionally drained, and then doubting yourself, right? So sometimes you're not the problem. Sometimes you're dealing with a high conflict personality. So we need to give you the tools of language and strategies to be able to protect yourself and not feel like, especially last episode, I used the analogy of a washing machine. And sometimes when you're with a person and their manipulation tactics and they're confusing everything and they're gaslighting you, you don't know if you're Arthur or Martha, if you're up or down, or what you say is right, or maybe I'm overreacting and then you gaslight yourself, right? Feels like I'm in a washing machine because I'm not really sure, right? So when we think about high conflict personality, according to Bill, a high conflict person is someone, and remember with all of this, it's patterns of behavior. So we're looking at the patterns of behavior, not isolated incidences where they do this once every 3 months. It's continuous patterns of behavior. And a high conflict is blaming others, extreme emotions, all or nothing thinking, very black and white, all or nothing, there's no gray, right? And sometimes they can have unmanaged and really intense emotions. And what I've always said in the past, sometimes when we think about mental health, good mental health is flexible and can go with the flow, is curious and open to learning and changing and adapting and evolving. Bad mental health is sometimes that black and white, all or nothing, very stubborn, not changing, my way or the highway, you're with me or you're against me. And so that can also be an indicator of not so good mental health and how it can be very difficult if you're in the opposite one. You're either with them or against them and there's no negotiation in between, right? So it's really interesting that sometimes it's estimated that about 10 to 15% of the population consistently displays high conflict behavior, and that's those patterns of behavior across different areas of our life. So whether that's family or workplace or even within our community, right? So please be aware, all of this, especially this episode, is not for diagnosing people. It's for your own curiosity about recognizing patterns of behaviors to then adjust your expectations. Because sometimes you walk into things and you have an expectation that the conversation's going to go a certain way. So then when you end up in the washing machine or when your expectations are broken, sometimes anger is a symptom of a broken expectation, right? Sometimes as well, this is not about the other person. This is only about you. And instead of you then getting on that bandwagon and blaming them and trying to educate them and change them, it's understanding how you're reacting and how you're responding and how you're engaging. So that then takes the responsibility off the other person to know how to be able to manage it and be happy with yourself. Instead of educating them or diagnosing them or whatever it is that comes with aggression, how can you then be able to know how to manage your own expectations in these situations, right? And you know, you can't change someone who doesn't want to change. You can't tell a smoker to stop smoking. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. And what's the other one? You can send someone a friend request they don't have to accept. You can give them the Wi-Fi password, but they don't have to connect, right? And it's for the younger ones, okay? So if you want to think about warning signs to know what's going on, and if you're experiencing a high conflict individual, because that will then inform you about how you respond and react with that person. Not about you educating or changing them, it's about you, right? So, do they have blaming others? Nothing is ever their fault. It's always about everyone else. 2 is that all or nothing thinking. You're either perfect or you're terrible. There's no in between, black and white. You're either with me or you're against me, right? Number 3 are those unmanaged emotions. Sometimes it can look like rage or complete withdrawal or silent treatment, stonewalling, or it can also look like those extreme emotional swings. And sometimes that could also look like ambivalent attachment, and that's with attachment theory, but we'll talk about that another time, right? And then number 4 is extreme behavior. So making false accusations, threats, or then complete sudden shifts. Just extreme. And you're like, where did that? And that's why you're in the washing machine, because you're like, well, where did that come from? It's so extreme, all or nothing, blaming everyone else, right? And then it's all the emotions, generally not positive, that are associated with that, right? So if you think about a couple of examples, it can be the co-worker who turns every disagreement into a crisis. You know those people that everything, for some reason, they're just never-ending crises in their life, and it's always drama, and you just don't understand why, right? It can be the co-parent who consistently and constantly rewrites history, right? All of those single mums that are co-parenting, as well as the family members who constantly guilt trip and explodes emotionally when they're held accountable. Oh, well, I'm an awful mum. I can never do anything right, can I? And you're just like, I was just saying, Mum, can you please listen to me, because you're dismissing me. I'm never good enough for you. And you're just like, whoa, okay. Do you know what I mean? Anything I've ever spoken about before, anything that's an overreaction is almost like an unresolved trauma response. So anyone that overreacts to a situation, that's generally a trauma response that's unresolved. So come and see me, or any other therapist, whatever that looks like, right? But these are indicators for you. So generally we want to get to a place where we can communicate and be autonomous and use our voice. But when we're dealing with high conflict people, it can be really, really difficult, because traditional communication may not work and it may not be effective, because you can't use reason and logic or empathy the same way. Because they're that black and white or extreme, you can't try and justify or reason, or because that's it, right? Often, because of whatever's happened to them in their life, unresolved trauma, they're often locked into that flight or fight emotional state. So they're always dysregulated. It's extreme anxiety. It's extreme vindictive, competitive, argumentative. They need to dominate. They always feel like they're the victim, and they always have to have the upper hand, right? Trying harder, explaining more, or accommodating usually feeds the fire. So because we're women, we have wombs, we are nurturers. Sometimes we feel like if I just make them feel better, or if I accommodate with them, or if I just explain that everything's okay, sometimes that actually makes things worse and fuels the fight, because they feel what happens when you trap a bear. It's not just going to chill in the corner, it's going to come back at you. So you've got to be able to understand, even though you think you're doing the right thing to try and connect and be logical, it's not going to work, because they're going to see it as an attack and they're going to go back harder. They're going to perceive, their perception is their reality, and they're going to perceive that I'm not understood, that you don't hear me, that you're wrong and you're just like the rest of them, therefore you're not safe, therefore I have to fight you harder. High conflict, right? And so that's what's really upsetting, because the traditional ways of being mature and talking about it and nurturing people and empathy and compassion sometimes almost feels like you're patronizing me, you're condescending. Do you know what I'm saying, right? So if you've ever walked away from a conversation with someone feeling like no matter how calm or reasonable or compassionate you were, things still explode, it's not you. It's not your lack of communication skills. It's the invisible rules of high conflict behavior. And that's the problem as well, that if you're trying to engage in mature conversation to hash things out, you don't have the rule book for what's going on, right? So traditional communications have a willingness to learn, shared desire for problem solving, as well as a basic sense of empathy and fairness. But high conflict people kind of lack these ingredients because of their unresolved trauma, or because of their attachment style, and because they're dysregulated in flight or fight, right? So then it can also feel like even when I'm trying to be nice, or they perceive criticism as something really awful, they avoid accountability at all, and it's the lack of control within the situation, right? So when you think about psychological traps in traditional communication, number one is the rational trap. So if in your mind, you'll think that if I just think more clearly, then they'll understand. If I just explain my perception or perceptive or whatever it is, then everything will be okay. But high conflict hear it as an attack, blame, rejection, and then they will double down because they feel like you don't understand them, right? Another trap is we want to be empathetic. We want to understand. If we can show more compassion, then maybe they will soften, right? But they can often see compassion as a weakness and then may escalate demands or even escalate manipulation or guilt, right? And then I'm in the washing machine, okay? Sometimes as well, communication, I want fairness. I want to be able to compromise. I want to negotiate moving forward, right? But otherwise, the high conflict people, all they want is validation of their emotions. They don't want mutual solutions. This isn't a negotiation moving forward. I need to win as opposed to getting a resolution. And that's where they're at, because they're dysregulated. They're not thinking clearly. They're reacting to everything. And that's why it can be really, really irrational, right? So when we come back to Bill, he is the founder of the High Conflict Institute. Who knew, right? There's literally a High Conflict Institute out there. And it definitely emphasizes the traditional problem-solving skills actually make things worse with high conflict individuals, because these individuals prioritize defending their identity and emotions over finding truth or compromise, right? There's a lot of neurological studies, especially when we come back to the polyvagal theory, which I love, right? Show that once triggered into an emotional survival mode, #flight, fight, dysregulated, rational thinking of our prefrontal cortex, which is your forehead, completely goes offline. People literally cannot process logic when they feel attacked. It's the same thing when you've got a toddler or even a teenager. If you're yelling at the toddler, they can't hear anything. They can't process it. They don't know what's happening. And so then they will either shut down or they will just start yelling back at you. But they can't hear, right? Because it's offline. So when we think as well about survivor studies, so when we look at either family court or we have a look at workplace bullying cases, these show that over-explaining to high conflict individuals leads to an increased verbal aggression, blame shifting, and emotional exhaustion. I can't. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's why it's difficult, and it feels like sometimes it's an unwinnable war, because from their perspective, they feel they're completely correct, they feel they're completely valid, and they genuinely feel that your tactics are condescending or you're being manipulative by showing compassion. Right? So, you cannot explain your way to peace with a high conflict person. It's impossible, right? That's an absolute term. Impossible. You cannot caretake their emotions enough to create accountability. You are flexible and rigid, flexible and grey and negotiate, which is good mental health. If someone is that black and white rigid, sometimes you can't, it doesn't matter what you do, you can't caretake them to come around and see, right? You cannot reason with someone out of a survival-led emotional response. So what that indicates is a lot of this comes to do with childhood trauma, okay? So you're not their therapist and they're not ready to get help. Therefore, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So you can only protect your boundaries, communicate clearly without feeding into the drama. And when I talk about communicating clearly, I'm going to
tell you the biff in a minute with it all. But you've also got to stay grounded in your own reality and not get swept up into their drama. I don't want drama, right? So, realizing that high conflict people aren't playing the same emotional game as you. They're fighting to control the narrative of the story, and it's their story, not yours. You cannot negotiate the truth with someone who's only negotiating to win. Now, when we come back to Bill, he talks about the BIFF, B-I-F-F, right? Brief. So when you want to try and talk to someone with this, women generally, because of society, we feel a lot of the time, or have been raised a lot of the time, we feel like a burden or an inconvenience. So we overtalk, we over-explain, we keep on going. That is not helpful, okay? Keep it short, keep it brief. Brief, keep it short. No long explanations, right? Brief. B is number 1. I is number 2, informative. Stick to the facts. No emotions, no opinions. Same thing as I said last week. That's not the truth. That's not the reality. I don't mean that. That's incorrect, right? The fact is this, the fact is that. Number 3 is F, which is friendly. Who would have thunk it, right? Friendly. Maintain a neutral, courteous tone. You need to avoid hostility at all costs. Don't get sucked into their thing. Otherwise, next thing you know, you're in the washing machine, right? But you've got to be able to be firm in your boundaries. Firm in your voice. Listen, I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with you, and that's okay. I don't want to engage in this anymore. If it's a partner or if it's work, I need to be able to get a third party in, or I'm going to go to hate, whatever that looks like, right? So if you think of like a wrong response that might annoy them or increase conflict more, you're completely misrepresenting what happened. I did my best. What are you doing? I'm not, you know what I mean? So you need to say things like, well, because they need validation. Thanks for sharing your concerns. I have another meeting at this time and then I'll see you then. Thanks, but no thanks, right? So there's this interesting analogy. So think of yourself like a flight attendant dealing with a disruptive passenger. You've got to be calm and clear and respectful. Don't get dragged into all that drama, honey. We're not doing that today, okay? So, most important thing, ladies, how to be able to protect your mental health. This is why you're here, because you need to be mentally strong, right? Most important one. You are not responsible for calming a high conflict person. Other people's behavior is not your responsibility. Stop it. Your behavior, your responses are your responsibility. Their stuff is their stuff. Stop trying to fix them or solve them or be nice to them or nurture them or be their caretaker. No, you're an adult. Sort it out. Okay? Your responsibility is with your own emotional regulation. I'm sorry if that came across harsh. I didn't mean to. Do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to prove a point. I don't mean to yell at you. You're doing the best that you can. And I've been there too. And that's very normal. But I want to normalize. Please don't do that anymore. Your stuff is your stuff. Their stuff is their stuff. Keep it separate. You don't have to constantly be their mum and nurture them, because it's not going to help. It just makes you upset. So don't do that anymore. Sorry, I won't speak to you that way anymore either. I'll be very mindful. Okay? And that's growth. Cool. Your responsibility is for your own emotional regulation. Just what I did then. I got upset. I got defensive on your behalf because of the injustice. I got dysregulated and angry. I'm then now able to get regulated and calm and apologize to you. Breathe. Get back to where it is. You're not the problem. That's your mantra. I'm not the problem. I'm not the problem. Their chaos is not my chaos. I'm not the problem. Their chaos is not my chaos. Limiting emotional exposure. When they're nice, be nice back. This is what I tell my kids, right? I brainwash my kids all the time. One of the brainwashes, quote unquote, it's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've already spoken about that in other episodes. If people are nice to you, be nice back. If people are mean to you, stay away. You don't want to be able to teach your kids that if someone's being mean to you, if the nicer you are to them, they will eventually come around. No. If someone's nice, you be nice back. If someone's mean, you stay away from them. You don't engage, right? Limit your emotional exposure, okay? You also need to choose positive people to surround yourself by. Positive people that don't gaslight you, don't make you feel bad. Choosing people that support you, okay? Reality is, you cannot change a high conflict person, but you can change how much power they have over your own peace, okay? So recognize when a high conflict person is because of the patterns of behavior. Respond calmly, factually with the BIFF method. BIFF method, that's difficult to say. Don't react, don't get suckered in. I'm not the problem. Their chaos is not my chaos. Don't engage, okay? Protect your peace. That should be your permanent mantra. Protect your peace, not their feelings, okay? So if this was a lot, or if this sounds like something or someone, maybe share it with someone that might benefit to be able to be this. Because even though it only says 10 to 15% of the population, somehow it feels a little bit more than that, all right? So thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate you. I hope you have a fabulous day, and let me know what you think about this episode, okay? Bye. If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you for your support. It takes me hours to research and create this for you, so I genuinely hope you enjoyed it and felt more mentally strong. If you have any suggestions or improvements, let me know, because I'm always open for criticisms. If you have found my information useful, please leave a review and subscribe. So by leaving a review, it's a value exchange. It's good karma. I value your support just as much as you value my free information. So find me on Instagram and Facebook by searching Mentally Strong Mums, and I'm Aussie, so it's spelled MUM. And then you can find heaps of resources on www.mentallystrongmums.com. And this podcast is for you. So let me know what topics you would like to see covered in future episodes. And if yourself is a professional that is working with mums and would like to be a guest to help other mums be mentally strong, I would love to support you. So message me on Instagram on Mentally Strong Mums, MUMS, all one word. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day, you beautiful mums.